The camera pans across a bustling city street, luxury cars, towering buildings, people rushing to work, when suddenly a tiny barefoot girl, no older than 8, appears clutching a crumpled résumé. Her eyes, red from sleepless nights, search every stranger's face for hope. No one stops. Not even when she whispers, "Please, I just need a job to save my mom." Hours later, inside the city's biggest corporation, the CEO, known for his ruthless efficiency, freezes mid-meeting as security drags in the same little girl for trespassing. But what happens next shatters his cold-hearted image forever. Why did the most powerful man in the city break down in tears? Watch till the end. Her truth will break your heart. The morning sun spilled over the city skyline, painting glass towers in gold while down below, the streets buzzed with hurried footsteps and honking cars. Somewhere between the chaos and the calm stood Lila, a fragile 8-year-old with tangled hair and dust on her face, clutching a paper résumé that looked more like a child's drawing than a formal application. Her tiny fingers trembled as she adjusted her mother's old scarf around her neck. The fabric faded but still carrying the scent of home, or what was left of it. Just a month ago that home had warmth, laughter, and the soft humming of her mother as she cooked breakfast before heading to work at a local factory. But a single accident had changed everything. A collapsed roof, a broken spine, and a hospital room that smelled of bleach and despair. The bills kept coming, the treatments kept failing, and the savings, if you could call a few wrinkled notes that, vanished in days. Now, Lila's world had shrunk to a single goal: save her mother. Each morning, she woke before dawn, staring at the photo of her mother smiling with pride. "I'll find a job, Mama," she'd whisper, voice cracking but firm with the determination only desperation could create. She didn't care that she was too young, too small, too poor. In her mind, there was no other choice. That morning, the streets felt colder. People brushed past her as if she were invisible, eyes glued to phones, minds occupied by meetings and deadlines. "Please, sir, do you have any work?" she'd ask in her tiny voice. But her words were swallowed by the city noise. One businessman gave her a disgusted look. Another woman clutched her purse tighter. By noon, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She sat on the curb outside a towering building, Harper Industries, one of the largest corporations in the country. Its glass facade reflected the sun like a mirror, blindingly perfect. The logo gleamed above the doors, "Building a better tomorrow." Leela stared at the slogan, whispering, Maybe they can build a better tomorrow for us too." She rose, brushing the dust off her dress, and walked toward the revolving doors. Security guards towered over her, exchanging puzzled glances. One bent down slightly, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Hey kid, this isn't a playground." But Lila didn't flinch. She held up her crumpled paper with both hands. "I want a job." The man blinked. "A what?" "A job," she repeated softly, her voice trembling but clear. "My mom is sick. I can clean, or bring water, or anything." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pity, perhaps. But he quickly masked it with professionalism. "Sorry, kid. You can't be here. Go home." "I don't have one," she whispered. Before the guard could respond, a sleek black car pulled up. Out stepped Ethan Harper, the CEO of Harper Industries. Mid-40s, tailored suit, sharp eyes, a man known in business circles for his ruthless decisions and zero tolerance for weakness. He built empires, bought out competitors, and crushed anyone who stood in his way. Lila didn't know who he was, but as the glass doors opened for him, she saw opportunity, the kind that only comes once. She ran forward, clutching her paper résumé. "Sir, please! Please help me." Security tried to stop her, but she slipped through, standing right before Ethan. Her voice shook as she looked up at him, eyes glistening with tears. "I just need a job. My mother is dying." For a brief moment, Ethan's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, before he turned to his assistant. "Call someone to handle this," he said coldly, walking past without another glance. The doors closed behind him, leaving Lila staring at her reflection in the glass, small, helpless, and unseen. The guards dragged her out gently, leaving her on the sidewalk once more. Her hands trembled as she clutched her crumpled paper tighter. "Please," she whispered to no one. As the day faded, the city lights flickered on one by one, each window glowing with life and warmth she didn't have. She wandered through the streets, eyes scanning for another chance, another open door. Every building looked the same, cold, tall, unreachable. By the time night fell, Lila found herself outside a bakery. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, making her stomach twist painfully. She pressed her hands against the glass, watching people laugh inside. The baker noticed her and came out with a small loaf wrapped in paper. "Here, sweetheart," he said softly. She took it, eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled sadly. "Go home, little one. It's not safe out here." But Lila couldn't go home. Not yet. Not without hope. That night she sat on the steps outside Harper Industries again. The wind howled and rain began to fall. She wrapped the scarf tighter around herself, whispering prayers into the cold night. Inside the building, the last lights flickered off, except for one on the top floor, where Ethan Harper still worked. He sat behind his massive desk, reviewing profit charts, his mind far from the streets below. But as lightning flashed across the skyline, he glanced out the window and froze. There in the rain, he saw her, the same little girl from earlier, huddled on the steps, soaked and shivering. For a moment, something deep in his chest stirred, a memory, faint but powerful. A small face years ago, crying in the dark when his own father had walked out. He tried to shake it off, turning back to his work. But the image wouldn't leave. An hour passed. 2. The rain didn't stop. Finally, frustration gnawed at him. He grabbed his coat, heading down to the lobby. The security guard looked surprised. "Sir, you're still here?" Ethan's tone was clipped. "That girl from earlier, is she still outside?" The guard hesitated. "Yes, sir. I told her to leave, but she didn't want to go." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let her in. Just make sure she's not freezing to death." Moments later, Lila was ushered inside, dripping wet, eyes wide as she looked around the vast marble lobby. The contrast was almost cruel. She, small and frail, surrounded by walls of gold and glass. Ethan watched her from a distance, arms crossed. He didn't know what to say. He didn't even know why he'd allowed this. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity. She looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you, sir. I just need work. Anything." The CEO, a man who had faced boardrooms and billion-dollar deals without blinking, suddenly found himself speechless before an 8-year-old. In that silent lobby, something began to shift. A faint crack in the armor he had built around his heart for decades. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, unaware that a story of pain, pride, and unexpected redemption had just begun. One that would soon make headlines across the nation. And deep within Harper Industries, for the first time in years, Ethan Harper felt something he had long forgotten, empathy. But he didn't yet realize that this small act of kindness would soon expose the wounds of his own past and change both their lives forever. The next morning, the world outside Harper Industries began as usual. People rushing, cars honking, and ambition pulsing through the streets. But inside the towering building, something had shifted. Ethan Harper sat at his desk, staring at the financial reports spread before him, yet unable to focus. The image of the little girl from last night haunted him, soaked to the bone, shivering, eyes full of hope and fear all at once. He had built his empire on logic and efficiency, on numbers that spoke louder than feelings. But this was something he couldn't quantify. He glanced at the security footage on his monitor, and there she was, sitting quietly in the corner of the reception area, her small hands folded in her lap. She hadn't asked for food, hadn't cried, hadn't moved much, just waited. Patiently. A part of him wanted to call someone, a social worker, a shelter, anyone. But another part whispered something else. What if she came here for a reason? He pressed the intercom. "Send her up." Moments later, Lila entered his office. Her shoes squeaked softly on the marble floor. Her scarf, still damp, clung to her shoulders. Ethan gestured toward a chair. "Sit." She obeyed quietly. He studied her for a long moment. What's your name? Lila, she murmured. Do you understand this is an office, not a charity? She nodded, clutching her paper resume. I can work, sir. I can clean or bring tea or help with papers. Please, I'll do anything. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from determination. Ethan leaned back, suppressing the uncomfortable twist in his chest. You're 8, he said flatly. I know, she replied, meeting his gaze. But I don't have time to wait. That sentence hit him harder than he expected. He dismissed her gently, asking his assistant to arrange a meal and warm clothes. But long after she left his office, her words echoed in his mind. I don't have time to wait. Days turned into weeks. Lila began coming to the building every morning, sitting in the lobby until someone found her a small task, sweeping corners, wiping tables or carrying files to the mailroom. The staff whispered about her. Some found her inspiring, others pitied her. The staff whispered about her. Some found her inspiring, others pitied her. But everyone noticed the way she carried herself. Quiet, polite, never complaining, never asking for more than what she needed. She earned her meals with her effort, not her tears. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself watching her more than he cared to admit. Each time he saw her, he was reminded of the years he spent clawing his way out of poverty. A childhood filled with hunger, loneliness, and a father who disappeared when life got hard. He had buried that past beneath layers of success and power, but Lila's presence unearthed it piece by piece. He began asking questions, discreetly. His assistant reported back. Lila's mother, Miriam, had been hospitalized for spinal injuries. The bills were mounting. There was no father in the picture, no relatives, just the two of them. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling an ache that was almost foreign. For years he had measured his worth in profits. But this little girl was teaching him a different kind of value, one that no chart could display. Still, he kept his distance. He told himself it wasn't his responsibility. Yet every time he passed her in the hallway, the guilt dug deeper. One afternoon, Harper Industries hosted a high-profile investor meeting. The conference room gleamed, polished glass tables, catered lunch, and the city's most powerful people gathered to discuss numbers that could change futures. Ethan was in his element, composed, commanding, respected. But just as he began his presentation, the door creaked open. Everyone turned. There stood Lila, holding a tray of tea she had insisted on helping carry from the pantry. Her small hands trembled under the weight, but she tried to smile. Sorry, sir, she whispered, placing it carefully on the table. A few investors exchanged amused looks. One of them chuckled under his breath. Another muttered, "Who lets a child work here?" Ethan's jaw clenched. He wanted to defend her, to say she wasn't just a random child. But he couldn't. Not yet. The image of his bored, smirking faces burned in his mind. When the meeting ended, he found Lila outside, wiping the tears she thought no one could see. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to make you angry." He crouched down to her level, his voice softer than it had been in years. "You didn't. But you don't belong here. This place, it's not kind to people like us." "People like us?" she echoed, tilting her head. Ethan froze. He hadn't meant to say that out loud. He stood quickly, brushing off the moment. "Go home, Lila," but she didn't move. "Home is the hospital, sir." Her words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by his office window, city lights glittering below like a million tiny lies, each one promising happiness but hiding emptiness. His mind replayed the meeting, the laughter, the look in Lila's eyes. The next morning, he made a decision that would surprise even himself. He went to the hospital. Miriam lay in a small room, pale and fragile, but her eyes sparkled when she saw her daughter enter. Lila ran to her bedside, holding her hand. "Mama, this is Mr. Ethan. He's the boss of the big building." Ethan smiled awkwardly. He wasn't used to being introduced like that. Miriam thanked him softly for letting her daughter help around the building. Her voice was weak but full of grace. "She tells me you're kind," she said. He looked away, ashamed. "She shouldn't be working." "Not at her age." "I told her that," Miriam whispered. But when a mother can't provide, the child tries to become one. That sentence stayed with him all day. Back at the office, Ethan called a meeting with his HR director. "Set up a fund," he ordered. "Medical aid for employee families in crisis. Anonymous sponsorship if needed." The HR head blinked. "That's new for you, sir." Ethan didn't respond. He just stared out the window. From that day forward, small changes rippled through Harper Industries. Employees noticed the CEO spending less time in boardrooms and more in break rooms, listening, observing. He started approving welfare projects, scholarships, food programs. The man who once counted only profits was now counting lives touched, and Lila, she became the heart of it all. Her laughter echoed through the halls. She drew pictures that hung in the cafeteria. She reminded tired workers to smile. People started saying she was the company's little light, but not everyone approved. Behind closed doors, board members murmured that Ethan had gone soft, that his charity obsession was bad for business. One executive, Marcus, saw Lila as a threat to the company's image, an 8-year-old wandering around the office. "It's unprofessional," he hissed during a meeting. Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "That 8-year-old has done more good here than most of you." The room fell silent. Still, the whispers grew louder, and when the press caught wind of the child worker in Harper Industries, it exploded into headlines. Reporters spun stories of corporate negligence, child exploitation, and hypocrisy. Ethan's phone buzzed nonstop. Investors panicked. Stocks dipped. The world that once applauded him was now turning against him. Fast. He called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. Ethan stepped up to the podium, the spotlight hot against his face. He took a deep breath, scanning the crowd. And there, at the edge of the stage, stood Lila, holding her mother's old scarf. He raised a hand to quiet the room. "You all want to know the truth," he began. "Yes, that little girl came into my company. Not because she wanted fame or money, but because she wanted to save her mother. And in doing so, she saved me." Gasps rippled through the audience. He continued, voice breaking slightly. "She reminded me of who I was before I forgot what humanity meant. Before I started valuing numbers more than people. If you call that weakness, then maybe the world needs more of it." A hush fell over the room. Cameras clicked. Somewhere in the front row, a reporter lowered his notepad, eyes wet, but not everyone was moved. Behind the scenes, Marcus was already planning his next move, one that would destroy everything Ethan was trying to rebuild. Because while the world was finally beginning to see the CEO's heart, greed and envy were still waiting in the shadows, ready to strike. What happens when kindness becomes a weapon against the powerful? When the man who rebuilt lives becomes the target of betrayal? The city buzzed with scandal. For weeks, the story of the poor girl in the CEO's tower dominated every screen, every headline, every whisper in the corporate world. Some called Ethan Harper a hero. Others called him a fraud, a man using a child's misery to polish his tarnished image. Inside Harper Industries, tension simmered like a ticking bomb. Board members murmured in corridors. Investors threatened to pull out. And Marcus, the ambitious senior executive, saw his opportunity. He waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came one rainy Friday morning. Ethan entered the boardroom, unaware that Marcus had secretly leaked a falsified financial report showing that company funds were being diverted to cover the medical expenses of one Miriam Carter, Lila's mother. The numbers were twisted, exaggerated, and stripped of context. By noon, the news spread like wildfire. CEO misuses company money to fund child's family. Reporters camped outside Harper Industries. Protesters gathered at the gates. Employees whispered nervously. And upstairs, Ethan stood alone, staring at the screen displaying his own downfall. For years he had been feared, respected, untouchable. But now, the same public that once idolized him was ready to tear him apart. He called an emergency meeting. The entire board assembled. Cameras were waiting outside the conference room, live feeds already rolling. Marcus was the first to speak, voice dripping with false concern. "Ethan, I warned you. Mixing emotion with business never ends well. We have shareholders to protect. This has gone too far. Ethan's knuckles whitened against the table. You leaked it, didn't you? Marcus smirked faintly. The truth leaks itself. The others shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up for Ethan. No one defended the man who had built the company from nothing. Just then, the doors opened, and Lila walked in. Gasps filled the room. Cameras turned instantly. She was wearing her mother's scarf, the ends frayed but clean, her small face pale yet determined. Ethan froze. Lila, you shouldn't be here, but she stepped forward. You said the truth matters, sir. So I came to tell it. The journalists rushed closer. Flashbulbs popped. The room filled with murmurs and tension so thick it felt alive. Lila climbed onto a chair so her small voice could be heard. Her tiny hands clutched the edge of the table as she spoke. My mom didn't take the company's money. Mr. Ethan helped us because nobody else would. He didn't buy us things. He bought my mom time to live. He gave her medicine, food, and hope. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't look away from the crowd. You call that stealing? Then maybe the world has forgotten what kindness looks like. Silence. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Marcus chuckled nervously. How touching. But a child's words don't change facts. Ethan stood slowly. For the first time in years, his voice shook, not from fear, but from truth. Facts can be manipulated, he said, turning toward the board. But compassion cannot. He looked at the journalists. Yes, I used company funds to create a humanitarian program that our own bylaws approved. The same program that has already saved 20 employee families from losing loved ones. But you won't see those headlines, will you? He turned back to Marcus. You saw an opportunity to destroy me. But what you didn't realize is, I've already been destroyed once. But what you didn't realize is, I've already been destroyed once. Years ago, when I lost my humanity chasing profit, this little girl reminded me what it means to be human again. The words hit like thunder. Lila stepped closer, holding out her crumpled résumé, the same one she had carried the day they met. You said I didn't belong here. But maybe I did, not to clean floors, but to clean hearts. The room fell into stunned silence. For a long, trembling moment, Ethan and Lila just stood there, two souls from different worlds, bound by the same wound, loss. Marcus tried to regain control. This is all very emotional, but he didn't finish. Because at that moment, Ethan's assistant burst into the room holding a document. Sir, the audit report just came in. She handed it over. Ethan read it silently, then placed it on the table for all to see. The report cleared him completely. Every transaction was legal, authorized, and transparent. Marcus's falsified report had been exposed as a fabrication. A wave of murmurs swept through the boardroom. Cameras zoomed in. Marcus's smirk vanished. Ethan spoke softly. You wanted to ruin me with lies. But you only proved that empathy isn't weakness. It's strength. He turned to the board. If any of you still believe that helping a child is a mistake, then this company doesn't deserve the name Harper Industries. Because what we build here isn't just profit, it's purpose. Lila smiled through her tears. For the first time, the crowd applauded, hesitant at first, then louder, until even the board members rose from their seats. Marcus tried to slip out quietly, but reporters swarmed him. Within hours, his name was trending for all the wrong reasons. That night, Ethan returned to his office. The storm had passed, but the emotions still lingered like aftershocks. He sat by the window staring at the city lights when Lila knocked softly on the door. You're still here? He asked. She nodded. Mama said thank you. She's feeling better, he smiled faintly. Good, that's what matters. She looked up at him, eyes full of sincerity. People said bad things about you. But I knew you weren't bad. Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't cried in years. Not when his company almost went bankrupt. Not when his friends betrayed him. Not even when he lost his parents. But now, tears filled his eyes. He knelt down, meeting her gaze. You saved me, Lila, she giggled softly. You saved me first. The room grew quiet. Outside, the city glowed, not cold and distant, but warm, alive, forgiving. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt peace, but life had one more surprise waiting. A week later, Harper Industries received an anonymous donation, enough to cover all of Miriam's medical expenses, and set up a small foundation in Lila's name. The Tomorrow Project, helping families in need. No one knew who sent it. Some said it was a billionaire investor inspired by the story. Others whispered it was Ethan himself. But Lila didn't care. She just knew her mother could finally come home. And when the hospital doors opened and Miriam stepped out, fragile but smiling, Lila ran into her arms, laughing through tears. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. As they hugged, he turned away, whispering under his breath, "You built a better tomorrow, Lila, not me." The weeks following the scandal changed everything, not just for Ethan Harper, but for everyone who had watched the story unfold. What began as a rumor of corruption transformed into a wave of compassion that swept across the city. People who once sneered at beggars began offering food. Strangers started donating to hospitals, schools, and shelters. Across social media, a single hashtag trended for weeks: Lila's Tomorrow. News channels replayed the press conference clip where the little girl's voice silenced a room full of billionaires. Commentators called it the moment that melted capitalism's heart. But for Ethan, the attention didn't matter. What mattered was what came after. He restructured Harper Industries from the ground up. The boardroom that once echoed with profit forecasts now hosted humanitarian initiatives. The new Tomorrow Project became the company's beating heart, a department dedicated entirely to funding healthcare, education, and emergency aid for families in crisis. Employees volunteered on weekends. Departments collaborated to run charity drives. Partnerships formed with orphanages and hospitals. The culture of greed and exhaustion slowly transformed into something alive, something human. And at the center of it all was Lila. Every morning, she arrived with her small backpack, greeted everyone by name, and drew pictures that lined the office walls. One sketch showed Ethan standing with her and her mother under a sun labeled Hope. Another showed the Harper Industries building, surrounded by hearts and flowers instead of skyscrapers. Ethan kept that drawing, framed on his desk, outside the building. Life for Lila and Miriam was changing too. The doctors called Miriam's recovery a miracle. Her spine, though fragile, began responding to treatment. Each day she grew stronger, thanks to proper care and rest, things they could finally afford. When she was discharged, the first place she visited wasn't home. It was Ethan's office. She entered quietly, walking with the help of a cane. Lila clung to her hand, eyes glowing with pride. Ethan rose from behind his desk, momentarily speechless. "You're walking," he murmured. Miriam smiled faintly. "You gave me the chance to." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, she added, "I don't have much to offer in return, but thank you for believing in my daughter when the world wouldn't." Ethan shook his head. "It wasn't belief," he said. "It was realization. She reminded me of the boy I used to be. Scared, hungry, invisible." Miriam's eyes softened. Then maybe it wasn't her who needed saving. That single sentence hung in the air, raw, honest, transformative. Months passed. The Tomorrow Project grew beyond anyone's expectations. It wasn't just a charity, it became a movement. Other corporations began following Harper Industries' lead. Policies changed. Schools received funding. Hospitals expanded outreach programs. And through every interview, every conference, every initiative, Ethan always said the same thing. It started with one little girl who wanted a job to save her mother. The phrase became iconic, printed on banners, quoted in speeches, even etched into a memorial plaque in the Harper Industries lobby beside a small statue of a young girl holding a piece of paper labeled Hope. Lila's paper résumé. 1 year later, the city celebrated the official launch of the Tomorrow Foundation, a public charity led by Ethan and Miriam. The event was broadcast live. Journalists, politicians, and celebrities filled the grand hall. But amidst all the applause, the moment belonged to Lila. She walked up to the stage in a simple white dress, holding her mother's hand. Her speech was short but powerful. "When I came here, she said softly. I was looking for a job. But what I found was family. My mom always said that kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away. So I want to give it back, to every child who thinks no one can see them. Because someone will. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Ethan stood at the edge of the stage, clapping quietly, tears glistening in his eyes. That night, after the event, Ethan walked alone through the empty Harper Industries lobby. The lights were dim, the air still. He stopped by the statue of Lila and smiled. He remembered the first time he had seen her, standing barefoot in the rain, holding that crumpled paper like a lifeline. He remembered how his first instinct had been to turn away, how easy it had been to ignore her pain. Now, she had become his compass, the reminder that no empire, no wealth, no title could ever matter more than a single act of kindness. He whispered softly, almost to himself. Thank you, Lila. The years moved on gently. Lila grew up, her laughter becoming a familiar echo in the company halls. Her mother began working part-time at the Tomorrow Foundation, helping single parents find support and jobs. And Ethan, now older, slower but wiser, found peace in purpose rather than power. He never remarried. He didn't need to. His heart, once hardened by ambition, now belonged entirely to the family he had found, not inherited. Every holiday, he visited Miriam and Lila in their small but cozy home. The walls were filled with drawings, photos, and handwritten notes from children the foundation had helped. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila, now a teenager, asked him, "Do you ever miss the old days, when you were just a CEO?" Ethan smiled faintly. "No, back then I built buildings. Now I build lives." Years later, when Ethan Harper passed away peacefully in his sleep, the world mourned. But his legacy lived on through every family saved, every child educated, every life touched by the Tomorrow Foundation. At his memorial, Lila, now grown, stood before thousands. Her voice trembled as she read her speech. "He taught me that being powerful doesn't mean being feared. It means being kind when you don't have to be. He didn't just change my life, he changed the world. One tear, one act, one heart at a time." Her mother stood beside her, holding back tears. The crowd rose to their feet in silence, a collective tribute not to a CEO, but to a man who rediscovered his soul through a child's faith. As Lila looked up toward the photo of Ethan displayed on the stage, she smiled. "You once said I reminded you of who you were, but you reminded me of who I could be." The audience wept. Cameras flashed. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the memorial plaque that read, "For every child who dares to hope, your tomorrow begins today."